Ownership training. My name is Kelly Jenkins, and I'll be walking you through the Reassign Ownership module today. And at a very high level, as its name suggests, the Reassign Ownership module allows you to reassign ownership of your records. It does only interact with the out-of-the-box owner field. Okay, so if you have any custom ownership fields, Reassign Ownership will not interact with those. And just one thing to be aware of. We have other modules that could deal with those, but Reassign Ownership only works with the out-of-the-box. But before we get started, I do have a few administrative things to talk about. And starting with the Today page, which is the screen that I'm sharing with you. First, we have our version number in the upper left-hand corner. So version 2.80.11 is the most current version of DemandTools. If you're not running the most current version, you will see an upgrade banner. And if you see an upgrade banner, we recommend that you upgrade. It is always free to upgrade, and you should always be running the latest version. Next, from the Today page, we have the self-help tile. So everything about DemandTools is documented out here. That's the entire self-help, or all of the modules are noted over here on the left-hand column. You can get to the module-specific documentation from the green circle to the left. So if you need to refer back to anything we talk about today, you can just click the green circle next to Reassign Ownership, and it'll take you directly there. Next, we have the live training tile. So I'm sure many of you are aware of how to register for live training. That's how you got to this call. But maybe somebody registered on your behalf, or you registered from an email. So I like to let everybody know that we offer training on all of our modules. All of our products and the modules within DemandTools. These classes are free to take. You can take them as many times as you'd like and as often as you'd like. Okay. Within each class description, there is a link to a previously recorded session. We started doing that because sometimes it's hard to get a whole hour to devote to this. So people drop off because they have emergencies they have to deal with. Or maybe you just want to watch it on your own time. So you can always access or get back to a previously recorded version in the class description. The default behavior of GoToWebinar is that everybody is muted. However, I encourage questions. So if you have any questions as we work through, I just ask that you type them into the questions box of the GoToWebinar panel. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with Reassign Ownership. We're going to work through several examples, very common use cases of using Reassign Ownership. And I mentioned earlier, it reassigns ownership of your records. The nice thing about Reassign Ownership, though, is that you can do the related list at the same time. So you can take a list of accounts and take them from Rep A to Rep B. This is one of the first examples we'll go through. But in that same path, you can also do Rep A's contacts, open opportunities, future events, any custom object where ownership is important, and assign it to Rep B in one pass through the module. You don't have to go object by object to do those reassignments. Okay, so that actually is the first example that we're going to go through. So I'm going to drill into the Reassign Ownership module here. Okay. And the very first thing that we want to do when we come in here is we need to pick which object we want to reassign from this drop-down. Okay, so we're going to do this on the accounts level because it is the most common thing people reassign. And when I select Use Object, we're going to see the top half of the screen populate, or I guess the whole screen really. And now we've got these two tabs. We can do our reassignments by querying the database, so using a condition, or we can reassign records from a spreadsheet. So maybe somebody's given you a spreadsheet. We're going to look at that a little bit later. Our first three examples are actually our first three-ish, 3 to 4 examples, we're going to be working with a where clause. Okay, so the default's going to have the radio button selected for use all, which means it's going to reassign all accounts. But in our case, our first example, our first condition, is we're going to take it from rep A and give it to rep B. Okay, real simple example. So I'm going to choose the use conditions radio button, and it ungrays out. Then I need to go to the owner field here. And whenever you need to query owner, and this is going to be a tool-wide statement, not just a reassign ownership statement. Wherever you need to query owner in our tools, you can do so by querying with the owner ID, which is that alphanumeric 15-digit ID that you can get out of the URL, or in some cases there's an 18-digit. You can also query on the owner alias or the owner name. So we've kind of built in these conversions for you, and it gives you a pick list-like interface, so you don't have to have that ID. That's nice, because it can be a pain to get to sometimes. So in this example, we're going to say we want to reassign accounts owned by Ashley. So I'm going to say owner name equals, when we're querying on an ID field, which is really what we're doing here, our operators available are going to be equal and not equal. Okay, and your available operators will change depending on the field type. In our next queries, we're going to see different operators available to us. So we're going to stick with the default, though, and we're going to say equals Ashley. Okay, and when I add the condition, it drops to the bottom, and that's when it's committed. And you can see when it drops down here, it just converted it to the ID for me. So that's nice because you don't have to have those handy. My list of users is pretty small because this is a really small organization, this org that we're logged into here. A lot of our users have hundreds or thousands of users in their org. And unfortunately, there is not a find option here. Okay, you can't do like Control F and there's nothing to push. But what you can do is you can filter the list. So if you want to do a right click, you can choose filter list. Let's say I want to look at all of my users. It does a contains in the name field. So all my users where the name contains Mark, for example. Click OK, and it'll bring back all of my users where the name contains Mark, including my Marketo user. To get my full list back, I'm going to do a secondary right click in the white space and click reset. But we're going to stick with Ashley, so we'll keep our condition the same. Now, in the lower half of the screen, what we're looking at here, these are my account fields. And what I need to do is select which fields I want to see in the results grid. So if we have users of our other modules, most of our other modules give us a results grid, allows us to review the data before we commit to making the changes. Kind of a common theme, not all modules, but most. So I just need to select which fields I want to see in the results grid. So I'm going to get the account name. We're going to get those address attributes. So we'll get street, city, state, and postal code. And we will get the annual revenue. Okay. So I will see these fields in my results grid. Moving on to step 2, this is where we actually do the reassignment of the records, okay, at least in the top half. And we've got several options. We're going to talk about them all, but we're going to start with that real simple one-to-one relationship. So we're going to say Ashley left the company, and we're going to say Charles took her place, so we are going to take Ashley's account records and assign them to Charles. So I'm going to choose this reassign to, okay? And then from my drop-down of users, I'm going to pick Charles Brady. Again, my list isn't that big. This looks a little bit different than it does on the other screen, but if you do need to filter it, here's the filter button where you can filter the records that say contain Mark. Okay, because that drop-down gets awfully big if you've got thousands of users. Now the lower half of the screen, particularly this part, this is where I choose which related lists move with the account. And so we're showing you all the related lists to the account. And some of these are checked by default. So we'll see that the contacts are checked by default, the future events, the open opportunities, and then finally the open tasks. The reason these are checked by default is because when you reassign an account through the Salesforce user interface, these are the related lists that reassign to the new account owner. But with Reassign Ownership, you have more control, right? So maybe I don't want to reassign the future events or the open opportunities. I can deselect those. Conversely, if there's other things I want to reassign, like maybe I want the open cases to be reassigned to the new account owner, which in this case is Charles Brady. Okay. Now this is a hidden drop down, this match parent owner, and that is the default. But we have two options here, and this is really hard to explain. So I'm going to try my best, but if you have any questions, just type them into the questions box of the GoToWebinar panel. I'm going to start with all records because it's easier to explain, and I'm not going to do it on the cases object. I'm going to do it on the contact object because that's an object everybody understands. So when I choose all records from this dropdown, it is going to take all the contact records on Ashley's account and assign them to Charles. Okay? It doesn't matter who currently owns them. Our other option, the match parent owner option, means it will only take contacts owned by Ashley and assign them to Charles, the new account owner. If anybody else has contacts, no, let me say that differently. If anybody else owns contacts on Ashley's account, they will not be reassigned to Charles. Only Ashley's will. Okay? So I hope that makes sense. All right, so now let's go to step 3 with our simple example and take a look at the results grid. So running through all the objects that it has to reassign, and down here is our results. So it found 4,332 records owned by Ashley, and it's going to reassign all 4,332 to Charles. And what we're looking at here, these columns that are white, these are the fields I asked it to return in this grid. This first column is the current owner, and then the last column is the new owner. Okay? And green indicates that they are active users. If they were red, it'd be an inactive user. And if we're reassigning leads and we see yellow, those are owned by user groups. Okay? Really straightforward example. I like to show the object distribution report. This breaks down everything that's being reassigned. So we can see we queried the 4332, and all 4332 are going to have a new owner. The account will have a new owner. And then it gives us a count of the related list. So I chose for the cases to be reassigned. So Charles is going to be inheriting 6 new cases and 40 contacts and 1372 tasks, because those are the boxes I had checked for the reassignment, the child objects to be reassigned. Okay. If I wanted to process these changes, we're not going to process changes till we get to the end, but to do it, you want to come to the lower right-hand corner and update records. And the reason we're not going to do it is because it does it in groups of 100. And so we would be sitting here a while to watch it go through the assignments of 4,300 accounts, 6 contacts, 3,600 contacts, 6 cases, and then 1,300 task records. It wouldn't take too long, but it's not a good use of our time. Okay, and it leads me to batch sizes. So by default, it will do the reassignments in batches of 100. You can change that to 200 per API call if you go to Edit and Options, and it's the very first option here. Okay, so you can set this as high as 200, but the default's 100. Okay. All right, so that's our first example. Next example, I'm just going to go through a few different ways that I see people use conditioning. So owner A to owner B is one way. Another thing people often do is they'll do reassignments based on annual revenue. Okay, so maybe I want to reassign the accounts where the annual revenue is greater than 10 million. I've got some star sales rep that should own all of those accounts. So we're just going to change it. We're going to go to the annual revenue field. And you'll see the operators change. So this is a number field. So we're going to say greater than 10 million. And we'll add the condition. Okay. Now I need to remove this condition owner equals Ashley because we're moving on. We have a lot of users get stuck on removing conditions. So I try to highlight this in every training. To remove a condition here or anywhere else in the tool, you want to push the whole row from the blue box to the left and push delete on the keyboard. Okay, so now we're querying records where the annual revenue is greater than 10 million. In step 2, we're going to stick with this one. We're going to pick one person to own these records. Very similar example. We'll say Lori is our star sales rep, and all of those account records should be assigned to Lori. Okay, and in this case, I don't want to reassign the cases, maybe just the contacts and the open opportunities. And then moving on to step 3. I didn't realize I had so many, but that's okay. You can see it does move rather quickly. I just try to make the population smaller for the sake of these calls. Okay, and here's the results grid. So here we can see the current owner and then the new owner. This stuff in the middle didn't change, just the conditions did. And if we look at our object distribution report now, we can see it found 17,000 account records with an annual revenue greater than 10 million, and only 16,841 are going to get a new owner. So what that means is that Lori already owns what the difference is between these two numbers. Okay, and then she's also going to inherit the 13,000 contacts, 237 opportunities, and 266 tasks. She's going to be awfully busy. Okay. All right. Next example on using a condition, and this is another common one that we see. I want to reassign my accounts that are owned by inactive users. So that's going to be a really good example where we can illustrate the table joins that are built into DemandTools. So wherever you see a plus sign, that is a table join to another object. And so the isActive flag is on the user object. So we can expand this and we can say the owner is active equals false. Okay, and we'll remove our annual revenue. I just want to reassign these records. Moving on to step 2. And maybe this time I don't want to just assign them to one person. Okay, maybe I want to distribute the owner. Okay, so maybe 50% goes to Kelly and 50% goes to Ashley. And so when I open this, I'm going to add a user, and we'll say Ashley or Kelly gets 50%. And we are going to say Ashley gets 50%. Obviously, the key here is your percentages need to equal 100. And I think that the way we display this is a little misleading. So to me, the way I read this is 50% of these account records are going to be assigned to Ashley and 50% are going to be assigned to Kelly. But that's really not what I'm doing here. I'm actually assigning a probability. This probably should read probability right here. So there's a 50% chance a record's going to be assigned to Kelly and a 50% chance a record's going to be assigned to Ashley. Okay, and the only parallel I can really draw so that it makes sense is like if you're flipping a coin, right? If you're flipping a coin, you get a 50% chance of a heads or tails. So if you flip that coin 3 times, it's very likely you're going to get heads 3 times, right? But the more times you flip that coin, the closer you're going to get to that 50-50 split. So the bigger the population, the closer you're going to be to the actual percentages you see here. Okay, so let's do this. And I don't think this population is very big, so let's go look at the results. Okay, so here's the current owner. So our inactive users are in pink. Here's the new proposed owner. Down here are the results. We have 117. And if we look at the object distribution report, we can see that Kelly's inheriting 57 accounts and Ashley is inheriting 60 accounts. So it's not an exact 50-50 split. Okay. Now the counts of the related list are always going to be the ones that are associated to the accounts Kelly's going to get. So it doesn't like split the contacts 50-50, just the accounts. And then all the related lists to those accounts go with the owner. Okay. I'm not sure how much that functionality is used, but it's there if you do want to use it. Okay. Next example, we are going to simulate a territory assignment. Okay. So far we've been using kind of conditions on very specific things. And we're going to use a condition where we're going to query records where the billing state equals Arizona or AZ. Then we're going to reassign the records based on zip code. I know a lot of people do zip code based assignments. So the first thing I need to do, though, is query those records where the state equals AZ or Arizona. And the state field's a text field. So here are the available operators for text fields. You can see those are changing depending on the field type. We've seen an ID field, we've seen a number field, and now we're seeing a text field. Okay, and I keep choosing equals because I'm just not creative enough to come up with an idea outside of that. So we're going to query records where the state equals Arizona or AZ, and I know that's awfully small on your screen. So it reads Arizona, comma, no space, AZ. We'll add the condition, and then we'll remove that one with a highlight and delete on the keyboard. We'll keep our fields in the results grid the same. Okay. And in step 2, when you want to reassign based on like match steps, we've got a button here to add those match steps. So we're going to say if they're in postal code or if the postal code equals, no, we're not going to use equals. That's the wrong constraint. I wanted to show you the zip code range constraint because this is the only place in DemandTools where you will see this constraint. Okay, so if the zip code range equals 85123 to 85100, those are going to be reassigned to Charles Brady. Then we'll add another match step, and we'll say if the postal code range is 85101 to 85200, those are going to go to Olivia. Okay, and we'll add one more match step. We're not going to go through all available postal codes in Arizona. I'm not even sure I would know what they are, but we'll just put one more in here. 85201 to 853. Okay. Those are going to go to, I don't know, Mark Esdale. Okay. And I did, you know, the single owner per postal code range. You could also use that distributed owners where you assign the probability if you'd like. You can also rename these. You will see this text in the results grid. So some people like to kind of remind themselves what exactly they did here. Okay. And my groups are mutually exclusive, right? It's not going to, they're never going to overlap. But if your groups are not mutually exclusive, it is important to understand that it works as a filtering system. So if it's evaluated in step 1 and reassigned, it is never reevaluated in subsequent steps. Okay. So it's going to run through these postal codes, and I don't think I hit all of my postal codes, so that's where this final use match tab kind of really becomes a final use. What do we want to do with that population that wasn't in any of the zip codes that I designated in my match steps? Maybe I need to reassign those to a specific person, like an admin, or if they're not in any of these zip codes, then I want to distribute the owners. Okay. Current user radio button's not relevant in any of these examples we've talked about so far. We'll talk about that in the next example. But the final radio button is do not reassign. So meaning if it's not in any of these zip codes, just leave it with who it's with. I don't want to reassign it. Okay. Okay, so now on to step 3 to look at the results. Okay. Kind of the same grid that we've seen in all of these examples. Here's the fields I wanted it to return. Current owner and new owner. Now, I haven't talked about this column because it hasn't been relevant because we haven't had match step. So this column here tells you what match step it found it in. And I can group this by my match step. So if I want to show groups and then drag up the match step into the gray bar, just got to move this just for a second. Okay, so here's my first group in this postal code range. Those are being assigned to Charles. Minimize that. The second range being assigned to Olivia, and the final range being assigned to Mark Esdale. Then what we're going to see are the records in Arizona where the postal code was not in any of those zip code ranges. And then it's got a purple column over here that says no match, which means it's not being reassigned. Okay. And when we do stuff like this, the object distribution report gets a little more interesting. So it found 4352 where the state equals AZ or Arizona, 4294 getting new account owners. And then here's a breakdown of the sub-objects, and then even further, how many of each person is inheriting. Okay. Sometimes people ask, can I get the details of the contacts that are being reassigned? The answer is not through reassign ownership. Okay, it's going to give you a count and that's it. However, when you actually process, which we'll do a little bit, probably the final example, we'll do that. But you're given restore files. And what is in the restore file are the IDs of the records that were reassigned for the accounts in all of the related lists that you chose, and the old owner. And what you could do is use those files with the Find Report IDs module to actually get information about, say, the contacts. Okay, but you can't through, the only thing available through Reassign Ownership is the count. Okay. All right. Next example. We're going to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about a common use case that people ask, and that is, can I use Reassign Ownership to reassign the contacts to the account owner? Because I have this business rule where the account owner should also own the contacts, and it's gotten out of line. I need to recalibrate that. Okay, and the answer is yes. And also I should note that contacts is just a common example. You can do this for any related list. I want to reassign the opportunities owned by opportunities to the account owner, or I want to reassign records in a custom object to the account owner. We're just going to use contacts as our example. And the way that you do this isn't necessarily straightforward. It's not going to make sense at first, but just stay with me, okay? So the first thing we want to do when we want to reassign a sub-object is we actually, from this drop down right here, want to pick the parent object. And in the beginning of this training, I said, well, you come in here and you pick from this drop down the record or the object that you want to reassign. And that's true, except in this case. Okay, so I'm going to leave this account. I want to reassign the account. And we'll just do this for records in Arizona. You could do it holistically by choosing the Use All Radio button. I'm not going to, though, because it's just not a good use of our time to watch it query all that data. So we're going to move on to step 2. And we're going to remove this match step stuff because we don't need it anymore. Okay. But this fourth radio button, that's where this becomes relevant. We want to reassign the account to the current user, the same person, for the express purpose of just doing the related list at the bottom. Okay, so in other words, it executes an update call on these account records to assign the account to the same person so that it will just do these related lists. And in this example, match parent owner is not going to work. You must choose all records. Okay, so we can see that the current owner equals the new owner column. You can drag them side, by the way. If we look at the object distribution report, what we see, it found 7234 account records where the state equals AZ or Arizona. The account records that will have a new owner is 0. Okay, but it will tell me 189 contacts are being reassigned. Glenn will inherit 1 contact, Mark will inherit 27, and so on down this list. If you need to reference back to this information, you can certainly copy to a clipboard and paste it somewhere. You can also have that information emailed to you. If I go back to step 2, I haven't really talked about this section yet, So you can create a task for each change, which will basically, it'll be assigned to the owner of the account record. It'll say, this record was reassigned to whoever. Or you can have that object distribution report put into an event in Salesforce or sent as an email to you, or I guess I should say to the person who is logged into DemandTools. And where you can always check who's logged in is down here in the gray bar. Okay. All right, we're going to go through our last example. I never can get this class to last quite a full hour. I even added 3 additional examples to this one. I don't know either. I'm crystal clear. I have you guys so confused. You don't even know what to ask. But anyway, the final example, we're going to reassign ownership of records provided to us in a file. So let's go to step 1. And we're going to keep the accounts because they're still in the accounts, but we're going to use this tab right here. Okay, and we're going to read in the file in the upper right corner, select file. And here's the accounts provided to me. Now, I'm working with a CSV file. Our tools are compatible with CSV, Access, or Excel. With CSV, you know, CSVs only can have one tab, so it just knows which tab I want to use, so it confirms that there's 527 records in here. However, if you're working with, say, Excel or Access, you would need to double-click which object or which tab you want to use to actually read it in. Okay, and you'll see the tabs listed here. And when we chose this tab, this row appeared here. And I need to pick the record ID. So here are my column headers. So that's the record ID. And then optionally, the owner ID. Okay? So in my case, I do have the owner ID in there. And it looks like I have some that are owned by inactive users. That's all this pop-up is telling me. If I want to proceed, we'll click yes. If I click no, I'd want to go change the owner in my spreadsheet to be an active owner. Okay. Next, in step 2, we'll see this is ungrayed out. And we can pull the owners from the ID given in the file. Now, you don't have to have the owner ID in the file. In my case, I do. You could say, we'll take these IDs and assign them to a specific person, or distribute the owners, or you could add match steps, right? So, and we could also add a match step. We could say, well, if it's in zip code range, of 85201 through 85203, those need to go to Mark Esdale, okay? And then if it's not in that zip code range, then I want to pull it from the file. And now we go to step 3. Okay, current owner, new owner. We can group by the match step. So if we wanted to see the ones that were assigned to Mark Esdale, let's see if we can, there it is, match step 1. Within those zip codes, those are going to Mark Esdale, else they are being pulled from the file. Okay. And those are really all the examples that I had planned. Like I said, I mean, I even added 3 extra ones that I'm getting done earlier than I usually do. If you have any questions, go ahead and start typing it. I just have a few closing statements. Starting with your tools are supported. If you need to reach out to us, you can do so from the Today page in the Tech Support tile. Okay, it fills out a form, it logs the case in the queue. But let's say that you can't get logged into DemandTools. Let me show you another place that you can access that form, and that's going to be from our website. Okay, the very first tab is Support, and you can open a technical case here. Same form, different place to access it. Now, if you're with a not-for-profit, I always hate saying this part at the end, but unfortunately we had to end direct technical support for our not-for-profit granted users. That program just became too big to support. But if you're with a not-for-profit, you can still reach out to us. We'll just send back a canned email, but it will contain links where you can get additional assistance, and maybe rather than trying to find those resources on your own, we can shoot them right back to you. One of those resources being, and it's relevant to everybody, is the search the support resources. So we've actually made all of our solutions in public. They're searchable here and they're Google searchable. So I think we have a solution out there on reassigning contacts. And so maybe rather than waiting on us to get back to you, you can find that solution on your own. That's account team members. Maybe we don't have a solution on that, and maybe we need to create one. I thought we did. But nonetheless, you can see it searches all of our forum. Okay. And that's all that I have. So thank you for joining me. Have a good afternoon. You will be getting a follow-up email that will contain a link to a previously recorded class. But thanks again. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.